past 3 years, Dying Light has slowly crept up the list of my favorite games this generation, to the point where it's in my top 3 now. It's not a perfect game, we all know the story's a little lackluster, but goddamn, that gameplay is as addictive as a big fat bag of crack cocaine. Every time I start up a new save file of Dying Light, I turn into Christian Bale from The Fighter for like 2 weeks, and recently, I got a hit of that new shit.
And by the way, this is just what happens in the day. At night, well, things tend to get a lot darker.
Dying Light 2 has finally been announced, and I, for one, could not be happier. Today, I'm going to be talking about everything I love about the first game while relating it to what we've seen of the sequel, and trying to hypothesize what exactly we'll be doing in Dying Light 2 come 2019. Without further ado, let's jump into the first thing I adore about Dying Light: the world design. So a little thing I love about the level design of Dying Light is the fact that unlike many, quote, open world games, interiors are integral to gameplay. So many open world games forget about this, but Dying Light fucking nails it like so few do. You search through interiors during the day and hide from volatiles in them at night. But either way, the insides of Dying Light's buildings are always interesting, fun to explore, and packed with useful crafting tools to progress through the game with. You can tell the game was on a bit of a budget simply due to the fact that you see a lot of very similar looking houses and that same bus over and over and over again, but it doesn't really matter as there's so many different types of buildings to explore, from large houses to stacked cramped apartments to shops to gas stations, that the lack of variety doesn't really rear its head all that often. Plus, these interiors are just so damn detailed, which is something that extends to the entire game. The atmosphere and fine detailing of Haran as a whole is immaculate. I guarantee these design tenets of packed interiors and very specific detailing will transfer over to Dying Light 2, but what I'm curious about is how they're going to balance the two types of environments that were featured across Dying Light's base campaign and DLC campaign. Dying Light is all about vaulting across cramped rooftops and finding out how to exploit the verticality of the world, but the following is kind of the complete opposite, featuring expansive fields and long stretches of nothing but the open road. I seriously doubt Techland would strip a feature from the original and not put it into the sequel, so I'm pretty confident we'll be seeing drivable vehicles, which means Techland is going to have to balance the engaging verticality of Dying Light's base game alongside the more open vehicle-ready areas. What I think this means is we'll be seeing way wider, cleared-out streets for vehicles to drive through, which is evidenced by the fact that the protagonist has to make this massive leap to clear the street below, as opposed to the first game when a street could usually be surmounted in a few steps across one of these things. What am I walking on here? What are these? I never even questioned that. Either way, it's more than confirmed that we'll be seeing a very dynamic city in Dying Light 2, so I bet that the map will feature a little bit of everything from the first game. I think we are going to see areas similar to the first game in terms of verticality, density, and building size, but I bet that's only going to be one part of the town, as opposed to a whole map unto itself. Dying Light has the slums and Old Town to explore, which are two pretty different locations both visually and gameplay-wise, but they're locked behind a loading screen. You can't run from one interesting part of town to the other. This is something I'm sure we'll see attempted in Dying Light 2. I bet the map is going to be a mix of the slums, Old Town, and the countryside. Small buildings, tall buildings, and wide open areas, possibly around the outskirts of the city. Whatever it ends up being, I truly cannot fucking wait to see the world these guys have been cooking up for the sequel. Now that we're done touching on the incredibly broad topic of world design, let's pare it down and focus on something very particular, which is the way heads explode. Alright, this is a weirdly specific one, but I gotta bring it up. The zombie physics in Dying Light are perfection. The zombies in Dying Light genuinely seem dumb as fuck, and that's exactly how it should be. They feebly shamble over railings, they tumble down hills until their heads explode. If they see you while they're at the top of a building, they'll literally just walk off of the building to get to you, often exploding in the process. It's fun as hell to just sit and zombie watch as these things shuffle through the streets. It's funny and tragic and ridiculous all at once, and I really hope we don't lose quiet moments like this because of the new humans during the day / infected during the night thing Techland is pitching as the hook of the sequel. But we'll save that topic for last. Back to the physics though, I just hope they expand that and make it even more dynamic and hilarious. A big part of the joy of Dying Light is exploiting the stupidity of zombies for your own gain, and I really hope that continues throughout the sequel. Same goes for the gore. I want even more brutal details displayed while I chop zombies into bits. I want to cut heads in half, chop motherfuckers into fourths, and watch the intestines spill out, all that sick shit. I also hope zombie body permanence is extended. It's a small thing that a lot of games have to do to keep the frame rate up and all that shit, but I hope dead bodies lie around long enough for you to turn around and take in your hard-fought murder sprees before they, disappear, like they have to. On to the third bullet point of the day, which is the sense of progression. One of the most satisfying aspects of the entire Dying Light experience is the sense of character progression from beginning to end. At the start of the game, climbing around Haran is a little bit of an ordeal. The animations are markedly slower than they are at the end of the game. You get winded while running, way quicker, all that standard stuff. Over the course of the game, you fill out 3 skill trees, all of which include a wide variety of extremely useful new parkour moves, attacks, and craftable items. I've said it before and I'll say it again, by the end of Dying Light, you have become Zombie Batman. You're faster, stronger, you can climb without getting tired, you can roll out of long drops, you're chopping off heads like it's your God-given mission in life. It's just fucking awesome. From hour 1 to hour 32, there is a massive, extremely satisfying sense of progression, and that's something I'm sure Techland is going to maintain moving forward. Not much I can add to this one, because a newer progression system for the sequel is going to be all about incorporating a huge amount of new moves to the player's arsenal. But man, I'm fucking hyped to see those skill trees. After Far Cry 5 and Assassin's Creed Origins, I'm so fucking done with useless skill trees that include a bunch of bullshit unlocks that you have to go through to get to the interesting stuff. And there was a little bit of that early on in Dying Light, so I can only hope that the sense of progression becomes even more refined in Dying Light 2. Okay, now that that's covered, let's briefly talk about a more in-depth melee combat system. Now this one is definitely confirmed. We are for sure getting more in-depth melee combat, but I'm gonna go over what I want to see anyway just because I love to hear myself talk. Fighting humans in Dying Light is kind of a pain, and kinda not fun. I guarantee this is a big part of why people were kinda like, whoa, when the first thing Techland showed off for Dying Light 2 was human v human gameplay, and I also guarantee that Techland knows this. They know melee combat against humans was rather simplistic and unsatisfying in the first game, and they've said they're expanding upon it to fix that issue. That being said, man, that's gonna take a lot of work. That's gonna take almost a complete overhaul of the combat system, right? The way Techland has described and shown off Dying Light 2 combat with humans looks pretty damn cool so far though, so I'm confident they can pull it off. The reliance on the environment to overcome human opponents is a really goddamn good idea, so I hope that's a big focus. I hope every single area in the game is built with that in mind so you can fight creatively against both humans and zombies alike. A nicely timed parry attack is probably going to make its way in there somehow. Tight timing windows are always an easy way to make gameplay that much more satisfying, especially when it comes to combat. Honestly, I don't have a lot of ideas to put out there in this department, so I guess I'll just leave that to Techland. Let the masters work it out. What I can say for certain is that we'll be seeing a lot of new contextual melee moves, probably all of which will be attached to a plethora of new skills we'll be receiving in the combat skill tree. One final thing, I hope stealth takedowns don't take so long to unlock this time around, but I don't think that'll be a problem as the demo shows off a wall run takedown attack that seems kinda similar to Far Cry's death from above stealth kill. On that note, let's talk about more in-depth stealth. Dying Light does feature light stealth elements, but bombastic action overwhelms subtlety at just about every turn. That crazy action and heart-pounding intensity is a huge part of what makes Dying Light so damn good, but more extensive player agency seems to be a huge element of Dying Light 2. So combine that with the fact that Techland added silenced pistols to the original game within the last few months, and I think that points to a much heavier emphasis on being able to choose between guns blazing and stealth in the sequel. What exactly we'll be able to do with stealth is most definitely still up in the air, so let's talk about what that might involve. A wider variety of stealth takedowns very well might be a new addition, as I mentioned earlier, and I think that would be great. Dying Light already includes a badass air takedown that can be used to enter combat situations with an unexpected bang, so I think we'll be seeing more stuff like that. I also hope we can do more creative, weird stuff, like walk around a neighborhood whistling at a bunch of biters to bring a horde with you into a combat situation, possibly without even alerting the enemies to your presence, basically having the zombies do all the work for you. It seems like the environment in the sequel will be even more dynamic than in the first game in terms of destructibility, so I hope that can come into play during stealth somehow too. Knocking a floor out from under unsuspecting raiders, jumping on rickety chandeliers to drop them on a group of opponents below, that kind of crazy shit. There's a lot of amazing stuff that can be done by combining Dying Light's parkour system with stealth gameplay. Add in a couple new stealth-centric craftable gadgets like smoke bombs and degrading silencers like the one featured in Metal Gear 5, and man, I just want this game right now. Show us the gameplay, Techland. Just show us the gameplay! Okay, so now I'm gonna start going into a few things that I didn't like so much about Dying Light's design. I have a bunch of bullet points, but they're all small things, features that I'm sure will be adjusted or expanded upon in the sequel. First up, let's talk about the minimap. One of the main problems I had with Dying Light was its over-reliance on its minimap. Now, I don't like minimaps. I'm done with that shit. I was done with that shit in 2010, so I really hope Techland can find a way to make the environments of Dying Light 2 a little more naturalistic to accommodate for the fact that I don't want to be staring into the corner of the screen the whole game. Sure, there was survivor sense in the first game, which is really useful for locating volatiles at night without having to fucking squint and look for white triangles on a white map with white streets and white buildings, but I don't think that was enough. I think they really need to buff up the survivor sense to help boost immersion as best as possible. Shit, it's as simple as making a few more icons pop up when survivor sense is activated, and making each burst of the sense last a few seconds longer with a wider radius. Anything to make that minimap less important, man, I'll take anything. Next up on the discussion docket, we have more accessible traps. I rarely used the environmental traps located around the world in the first Dying Light, and that's because I think they were just a little too ineffectual. They require you to know that they're there in advance, because when you're sprinting full stop through the city, you just don't have time to first see the indicator pop up on the screen, press square, and then wait for the trap to go off. If I'm not mistaken, the traps seem to have a brief delay of about a second or two before they turn on, which may sound like nothing, but 1 or 2 seconds in Dying Light is the difference between life and death. I need the traps to be quicker and bigger if I'm going to use them the second time around. They just need to be a little bit more accessible. I'd be more than willing to learn their locations throughout the world if actually using them wasn't such a task. Traps that I did consistently use in the first game were the spike walls. Those were very useful and felt natural to engage with during the heat of battle, so I hope there are more of those kind of inherently deadly traps lying around Dying Light 2's world. Pitfalls, spike walls, collapsible floors, pillars that you can push onto people by running up the side of them, quick and satisfying reactive moments like that. Number 3 on my list of minor complaints is the balance of nighttime gameplay versus daytime gameplay. Now this is something I've heard directly addressed by the people at Techland. Let's take a look at this interview clip real quick.
The Dying Light cycle, of course, is there still, and it is affecting the game in a way that was not made before, which means that day is for the human and night stays for the infected. This will give us a bit different experience than it was before, because before we've heard that night is too scary. And right now we want to, answer our community.
So she's saying that nighttime was too scary, and to that I say, fuck yes it was! No, it's not that it was too scary, it's more the fact that daytime gameplay feels more rewarding to me on nearly every level. I don't find a reason to explore Dying Light's game world at night. It's a lot more difficult, you die a lot more often, the world is packed with insta-kill zombie cops, it's inherently harder to see things and explore the world, you often lose all your survivor points if you're terrible at the game like I am, the list goes on. Exploring Dying Light's world during the day can almost become a zen-like experience of fluid motion and constant discovery. And the nighttime gameplay just never gave me that same feeling, for all the reasons I just listed off. I really hope Techland can find better ways to make nighttime a more rewarding and enticing experience the second time around, because just giving me double the experience points for everything wasn't enough. On to the crafting system! So this one's actually more about the menu design of Dying Light than anything. Sure, it's easy to navigate the crafting menu at the beginning of the game, but by hour 30, that shit is a novella, bordering on a full-blown novel. If you want to craft a medkit in the heat of battle in the final hours of Dying Light, you gotta stop the game cold and scroll down through a list of 50 plus options before landing on the one thing you need. I love how expansive this crafting system is. It's one of the most satisfying systems I've ever used simply based on how many options it gives the player, but it has the 2 problems that I just listed off. 1, it breaks the flow of the gameplay, and 2, it's a fussy mess to navigate. There's just way too much stuff. It needs to be organized in a more elegant way than just listing off all of the things in a row. So I bet now you're asking, well, Charlie, if you're saying pausing the game to craft breaks the flow, does that mean crafting should take place in real time on some Last of Us shit? And my response to that is, I don't know. Pausing to craft is a huge part of Dying Light. You're doing it every couple of minutes max. So changing that and making it take place in real time, well, that would be a big fucking change. I would imagine that would involve rehauling the crafting system in its entirety from the ground up, so I really can't say either way what they're gonna do with it. If I had to call it now though, I bet we're still gonna have to pause to craft. I just hope they find a way to put together the crafting menu a bit more cleanly. So now, before we wrap everything up, let's quickly hit on that very interesting humans during the day, zombies during the night equation that Techland pitched at E3. First off, I do not know if there are going to be zombies during the day or not for sure. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of contrasting reports when it comes to this issue. I think Techland just needs to come out and make this clear. But at the moment, it seems that there will be zombies roaming through the streets during the day in some areas of the city. This is good, because if the game plainly excluded zombies from the outside world during the day, that would be not good. Daytime zombie slaying is the gameplay pillar of Dying Light. It's how I personally spent like 80% of the game. I'm not sure about you guys. Now, while I sincerely hope that we'll be getting nice, quiet, zombie-packed views of streets like this one in the sequel, I'm not adverse to new ideas, as long as the things I love about the first game are still present. I like I Am Legend, I can vibe with this. I find a way to shove Dishonored into like every video I make, so I want this to be kind of like Dishonored and Dishonored 2. The second entry in that franchise did nothing but build upon that first game. It didn't strip away any powers or mechanics, it only added things to the gameplay. And that is exactly what I hope Techland is doing with their sequel. Let's just hope that they handle the story part a little bit better than Dishonored 2.
In conclusion,
Dying Light is a fucking wonderful game made by incredibly talented people, and I cannot wait to see what the sequel has to offer. Once every year or two, if I'm lucky, a game shows up that hypes me up beyond all belief. A game I cannot wait for, and I can already tell Dying Light 2 is the next one of those for me. I'm gonna be on this subreddit like a fucking tick for the next year, so I look forward to getting to know all of my fellow zombie slayers as we approach this long-awaited sequel. Strap in, folks. It's gonna be an agonizing wait.